All right. Well, welcome everyone to this virtual lecture. My name is Matt Dickinson. Um, I'll be talking today about the topic of bird language. So just before I get into that, just want to give a big thanks to Scott, Matt, and Rich for having me do the class. I'm here talking to myself alone in a room, but I'm hoping you guys all enjoy what I have to talk about today. And so yeah, big thanks to Scott, Matt, and Rich. They've been huge mentors for me over the years, and I just appreciate them a lot. So anyway, thank you. So yeah, just a quick introduce myself. My name is Matt, and I am a graduate of College of the Atlantic. So I graduated back in 2012. I TA'd the ornithology class for at least 2 years, and did a bunch of stuff out on Great Duck and Little Duck Island, a little bit on the Rock. I worked on Petit Manan with the terns there, up the coast a little bit. So I've worked on a bunch of seabird islands here. I've worked in the tropics, as looking for nests in the Amazon. I've done bird banding projects. I've done migration studies. I've worked with songbirds. I've done territory mapping, seabirds, lots of different experiences working as a field tech. And currently I work for the Fish and Wildlife Service. I'm working for the Maine Breeding Bird Atlas. It's a 10-year, well, it's a 5-year study of the entire state of Maine. So we're in year 3 right now. Rich is a big part of that here in Hancock County. And anyway, so I work as a tech for that, and I do alpine field work. So I spend a lot of time in Baxter State Park on Mount Katahdin and other mountains surveying, and then up in the Allagash region and North Woods. So they send me where most people aren't going birding. So I go out and I survey and I find out what's there and we report back. And at the end of the 5 years, we'll have a whole map of the entire state and all the breeding birds. So anyway, this is part of my job, talking about birds. I'm an educator as well, and also studying them. So that's enough about me, but thought you should know a little bit. So anyway, so today we're going to be talking about bird language. And so this is a name. It's not the best term for this, but that's what we're going to call it. I thought too long about what it might actually become, but anyway, this is the title slide. It's called bird language. We're learning about bird language, but actually, really, we're going to be learning about a bunch of different things here: bird song ecology, the natural history of how to understand what birds are saying, all that kind of stuff. And so, you know, we have this American robin here in the front. What is it saying right now? What is this bird saying with its body language? That would be one of the questions of the day. So trying to ask the question, what is this bird telling me? So yeah, in this lecture, I'm going to talk about cover topics that are natural history related, lots of ecology stuff, and definitely human ecology. I do have a degree in human ecology. And so I think it's important that we talk about some of the other, instead of just focusing on the science, we bring in art, we bring in personal perspective, we get in anthropology, and sort of collaborate in all these different ways to learn about our questions that we have. And what questions do we have? Oh, let's see. There we go. So see, these are some of the main questions that we're going to be talking about today. In relation to bird language, these are the questions. So, you know, the first 4 on the top are answerable in the realm of science. So we can say, why do birds sing? There must be reasons for that. How do they know their songs? Like, did they learn them? Are they inherited? Are they instinct? Why and how do they use alarm calls? This is really important if we want to understand what the birds are saying. Go into that bottom question. But alarm calls are also really, really studied, right? Especially right now in the field of birdsong ecology. So, and then how have these behaviors evolved? So definitely throughout, we'll talk about different theories and ways that we think that maybe these things have come about. So just a caveat here that we're really going to be brushing the surface on a lot of these things. And I'm trying to give you the best perspective that I know on some of the science, some of my thoughts and experiences, paying attention to birds for a long time, sort of combining the two. Very human ecological, you could say. But yeah, the core question is, what is this bird telling me? So I really feel that as ornithology students, this should be one of your core questions. Just studying the natural history of birds, listening to birds, hearing their calls. What is this bird saying? So this picture here is a picture of a leopard from Africa. And I put this here as just a reminder of something, of going back to our ancestral roots in Africa, as hunter-gatherers, on the landscape, looking for food and shelter and trying to get away from predators. And in that ancestral past, for millions and millions of years, until very recently, we really had a need to pay attention to birds. We had to pay attention to them to survive. And we tuned into the birds and what the birds were saying, and that helped us know when predators were around. And so the leopard was a big one. So when I was in Africa a couple of years ago, we were using bird language, and the guides that were bringing me around in the bush were using bird language, understanding what the birds are telling them to find predators, to show us, oh, there's the leopard, because we heard the ant shrike calling over here, and it let us know where it was, but also to protect us, because we want to make sure that we're safe. And this is true for our ancestors as well. They were tuned in to all the birds around them and helped them to actually survive. So that's part of all of our ancestry. No matter who you are, no matter what your background is, we all have that in our DNA. We have like our biology, our human biology is intertwined with the bird biology. And there's all different kinds of cues that birds give us to let us know if things are okay, if things are getting crazy. If there's alarm behavior, it's telling us that there's something off, something wrong. And we are particularly cued to the sound. So the bird sounds give us a bigger bubble of awareness, you could say, on the landscape. They can tell us what's going on around us farther away than our eyesight can, which is our most dominant sense, of course. So this is a picture of the bird-headed man. This is an illustration from somewhere around 15,000 to 10,000 BC, so like 17,000 to 15,000 or to 12,000 years ago. Pretty amazing to see something like this. There's a lot of really amazing cave art that's been discovered, but this is actually the first known representation of birds in art. I think it's pretty cool. And what you can see too is that you can't see what I'm pointing at here, of course, but there's a bird on the bottom left under the man, but you can also see that the man has a bird head. That's why it's called the bird-headed man. And I think it's really interesting because it shows how we have connected with birds from time immemorial, and we have related with birds. So there's like this relationship between birds and humans, and we see ourselves in birds a lot. And we see ourselves communicating by listening to the birds, but also communicating back to the birds. There's just so many similarities between humans and birds, it turns out. So we're mostly, especially I'm talking about songbirds, we're mostly diurnal. We see in color. Generally, the sounds that we use and we can hear are in the same frequencies. We are very high energy. We use lots of energy. We move around. We're generally monogamous. There's just so many similarities between birds and humans. And I think throughout cultures in human history, you can see that relationship, that connection that birds represent, the symbolism of birds. You know, birds in art often represent peace and serenity, but they can mean all kinds of things. And I guess I bring this up because I do think it's important to think about, and this is the human ecologist in me, to think about what is the mythology of birds. How do we like think about them really on a psychological level? How do we relate with them? And thinking about how they're represented in art is really a good way to get at some of those questions. And so we can look at modern day art too, and movies and things like that, and how are birds represented in movies, in overt ways and in more subtle ways. And I find that when I'm watching movies, I'm always birding. I'm sure Scott, Matt, and Rich can relate with that. When you're like watching a movie and you're hearing all the different bird sounds in the background, but they're actually using those very intentionally, the director, the producers, to create a feeling, an atmosphere. So sometimes they might, like, you'll notice blue jay sounds like jay, 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 when things are getting tense. It's kind of like this alarm sequence that's coming up. So they know how to subconsciously tell our brains how to feel, and movie producers have sort of tapped into that. And so that's just something I wanted to bring into the conversation here, was just thinking about how we relate with birds and art, and how that affects communication, how that affects our interpretation of what they're saying. And it also is a reminder too of our that, going back to that long ancestral relationship we've had with birds. Well, let's take a second here. Let's see if this works before we get to the next slide. I'm just gonna watch this hermit thrush sing for a second. Just take it in. I love that video so much. So cool. So just like, obviously there's no one in front of me, but just to ask and pause, like, how does that make you feel, like, inside, internally, listening to a song like that? Do you feel more peaceful? Does it make you anxious? What is this communicating to us? Okay, let's see if I can get this back to. All right. All right, sorry about that. All right, so gotta listen to some bird songs. We'll have a few. I'm gonna try and put a few videos and sounds into this because it is a sound focused presentation. Okay, so we're gonna weave in and out of the natural history and science here, but so we're gonna start. This slide is about a naturalist sort of perspective on birds, as opposed to a scientific one. So we can describe basically, like, generally all the different vocalizations that birds make into these 5 voices. So they're called the 5 voices of the birds. And we have song, contact call, begging calls, territorial aggression, and alarms. So, I mean, there's going to be outliers, but this is just a helpful sort of toolbox for you. When you're out in the field, you can ask the question, okay, what voice is that bird making right now with that specific call? Is it a song? Is that begging? So that's how it can help. And let's go and we can listen. So here's the American robin for those that need a visual, but I'm sure many of you are familiar with them. So here's a website called, it's the American Robin Dictionary of Songs and Sounds. I think it's a great little tool site, but it has it has some of the different calls and vocalizations that robins are going to make. So we're going to kind of go through these 5 voices here with this. So let's start with song. So the typical song of a robin sounds like this. Okay, so each of those little phrases is actually a song in and of itself. So robins are piecing together a bunch of different songs to create like an overall song. And each male is going to have its own song sequence and its own individuality and all that kind of stuff. But we have to go back. So what is the bird saying when it's singing? What do we understand? If I was in a classroom with you, I suppose that's the question I would just pose to the class. But so singing birds they're warding off other males from their territories. They're attracting females, and they're maintaining their territory, the territory boundaries. So males are creating these circular or these territory boundaries by using song. It is notable that sometimes birds will use song for some of these other calls. We'll get to that a little bit more later. So it can be this can be really quite complicated at times, but we'll get into that later, I think. Let's see, what is a call? So here's a call note. Okay, so we have the peak and tut. That's what they're calling it here. So this is a low-grade alarm call. So it would be in that last category of alarm. Sometimes they actually might use this as a contact call, and sometimes they might use it as an alarm call as well. So let's talk about what a contact call is for a second. So contact call is often used just for a pair of birds to make sure that they're in touch. So it's like a quick text in human language. It's like hey, how are you doing? You okay? What'd you do today? That kind of just to check in. So you'll hear like cardinals often doing like in the brush. They can't see each other. They're feeding on the ground in like dense vegetation, but they're making these calls to let each other know that they're okay. And if one stops making the call, then the other one will look around. Hey, what's going on? You might hear the other one get a little more aggravated in its calls. They actually don't have a really good contact call here for the robin, but I think they do use the tut as a way to contact call sometimes. All right, begging calls. This is one that we really only hear at certain times of the year when there's nestlings around. But begging calls are often really insistent, like over and over and over and over and over again. These are calls, that are basically they're saying, feed me, feed me, feed me, feed me, feed me, over and over and over again. Give me food, give me food. And often we can know that there's, something happening when all those begging calls cease. So that you hear beep, 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 begging, 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 and then silence. What's going on over there? When I worked in the Amazon, we actually had, in the Amazon, almost no birds actually use begging calls at all. Like this voice of the bird does not exist because the cost of begging is so high because there's so many predators that they don't beg. And I know that there's been studies that show that, some birds beg more than others, and sometimes that has a lot of costs. So you might know there sometimes are starling nests that beg more than other nests, and those are the ones that get predated upon more often. One cool study that I saw from Ontario, from Algonquin Park in Ontario, was about black bears and how black bears tune into the begging calls of yellow-bellied sapsuckers, and these are like woodpeckers, they're cavity nesters, and so they usually feel pretty comfortable, the chicks, begging for long periods of time. They have the wood to protect them, but the bears would tune into these calls and then hone in on them and climb up the trees, and they would literally take off chunks of wood and then take out the babies. But it was interesting because they were only able to get the chicks out of like aspen or fir or other softwoods, but the maples and beeches were like, if depending on what the sapsucker picked as far as a nesting cavity, the bear was better able to get in or not able to get in. So it's sort of actually, it's like a little micro, like natural selection going on there. Kind of interesting. Territorial aggression. This is a really big one. So the pekin tut might be used for territorial aggression, but often I find that the whinny is used for territorial. So this is like the puffing their chest out. They're like, "Hey, this is my spot." No, it's like it's like another level of territoriality beyond song. And oftentimes it can be confused for alarm. Oftentimes, like, it sounds aggressive. I mean, it is aggressive, and it sounds like something's going down, something's happening, but actually, in fact, things are okay. There's just a little tussle going on, and it's going to